Obviously, there is a complicated history between the Middle East, the West, and none of us, I think, should be immune from criticism in terms of specific policies, but the notion that the West is at war with Islam is an ugly lie.
President Obama at this week's summit on countering violent extremism, stating again, we are not at war with Islam. But is the gathering to stop violence from people who may have a twisted view of what the religion Islam means too little and maybe even too late? Let's welcome back to Midpoint former Pennsylvania Congressman and Executive Chairman of Wexler Walker, Robert Walker. And we're joined also by former presidential hopeful and diplomatic, current political activist, Ambassador Alan Keyes. Gentlemen, we thank you both for being here today.
Thank you.
Good to be with you.
Robert, I'm going to start with you on this one. The president makes his statement, says we're not at war with Islam. We need to better educate folks, and maybe even some of the Muslim community leaders need to be less boring in order to get us back into the fight and win the war against ISIS. All right, truthful or delusional?
Well, it is absolutely true that all of Islam is not involved, but there is a sect of Islam that is involved. And the fact that we won't name them and call them Islam extremists and Islam radicals does mean that we are not defining the enemy. You have a hard time enlisting people to the fight if you're not defining who it is that you're actually battling.
But the president will fire back at that, though. Bob, let me interrupt you 1 second. The president and his people will fire back at that, and they will say, we don't want to continue to pound away at Muslims and Islam, because, as you said, not everybody is involved, so it's better to go ahead and not give them any credibility.
Which is the reason why it would be very nice if some of the Islamic moderates would come forward and join us in making the case that needs to be made against these radicals who are causing major problems throughout the world. And so that would be a step in the right direction. The other concern I have is that the reason why the president's doing this is because it involves his Iranian negotiations. And I think we have a great deal of concern about where the direction of those negotiations is headed.
All right, I'll talk about Iran here in just a moment. So, Alan, let me get it to you then. The president with his summit on extremism, did he waste everybody's time?
Well, I think that he has obviously not wasted much time getting knowledge and information about what is actually at the root of the problem. He doesn't understand that religion has to be taken seriously, and that religious people take it very seriously. And whether you're Christian or Islam, that has to be taken account of. Second, if you take it very seriously, especially if it's a religion of the book, where you have a Quran or a Bible, then you've got to sit down and get a sense of just what is difficult and what is not difficult based on that scripture. In Christianity, for instance, it's difficult to make a case for violence, ever, because Christ was pretty clear, turn the other cheek. And when his apostles asked whether they should do something about people who were preaching falsely in his name, he basically said God would take care of it. And he didn't lay that burden. Instead, he laid the burden of the discussion of whether Christians have to be pacifists, whether they can even defend themselves against a violent assault.
Well, but Alan, let's dig into this a minute if I can. One second, if I can for a moment here, because we got about a minute and then we'll take a break. But this comes back to the constant here, that we've known about Islamic extremism for decades in this country. This is not something that all of a sudden has slapped us in the face. So why are we at 2015 then, and we still haven't figured out how to separate religion from fanaticism?
Because, in point of fact, the Islamic religion has the difficulty in the other direction. I read an article the other day by an Islamic scholar who was clear about the point. You go through all of the authoritative sources of Islam, the Quran, the Hadith, the 25 authorities widely acknowledged to be the sources of Islamic understanding, and you don't find anything that refutes what ISIS is doing and makes difficulties for it. That's what the point I was trying to make. So if you have something that's rooted in a scripture that actually seems on the face of it to authorize what they are doing, which is basically killing folks who refuse to accept Islam, that is got to be factored in. You can't lie to yourself about that. You can't, because of your upbringing and your biases, try to pretend it's not going on. Obama's a peculiar combination of that kind of religious upbringing, which makes him very sensitive about saying anything negative about what's actually in Islam, but also a kind of blithe, stupid materialism that actually has the utmost contempt for the fact that human life does not consist in materialism.
Okay, Alan, I'm going to ask you to hold it there for 1 second.
In that respect doesn't help.
We're right up against a break. I'm going to ask you both to stand by because we still have to get back to this idea about education and boring Muslim community leaders, something else the president said. Stay with us. Breaking back. We'll talk more about this, the president's reaction, when we continue right here on Midpoint. All right, welcome back to Midpoint. Former diplomat Alan Keyes and former Congressman Robert Walker. Congressman, let me get to you then to start this off, because as we listen to what the president says, he is talking about working with a lot of different nations. And let's be real honest here. These are nations that in many ways don't want to be seen working with America in the first place for fear of their own ideologies. What's on the ground there? Is there any reason to believe that when the president says we can solve this by all working together, it does sound a little kumbaya-ish, if you will, to people, knowing the realities of what happens on the ground and the way these other governments work in the Middle East? Congressman, can you hear me?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I thought I heard you say that you're going down. Well, this is a real problem with where the president is. The president is saying that we can solve this with all kinds of other things. In the case of Iran and other nations, they are state sponsors of terrorism. They are not about to take the president's advice in terms of what they should be doing with their populations. These are people who have allowed training in their countries and who have paid for a lot of this terrorism to take place. And so we have decades now of looking at this and understanding that these people are not going to be dealt with in any way other than taking a military action against them.
So then what is the answer? And I hate to keep driving at this, but we keep going around and around in circles, it seems, at times. What is the answer? You're trying to split religion from terrorism here. You're dealing with ideologies we don't understand. It would seem as if there really is no answer at this point other than just brute force, because it's the only thing we've got.
Well, from my perspective and so on, brute force is a part of it. I think that there also needs to be a lot of diplomacy done, because there are nations of the world that would join with us in an effort to try to deal with some of the underlying problems. But the fact is that until you get rid of people who are prepared to kill as their main motive of operation, we don't have an answer other than the use of brute force.
Okay.
Ambassador, let me get it to you then, because here we go. And it now comes down to the whole brute force issue. You hear people talk, you hear the strategists talk, and again, it's the old kill them all, let God sort them out. But there are people saying that we cannot win like that. They will continue to propagate. There will continue to be new terrorists. And until we get to the core of the matter here, I guess that's what the president's trying to say. We need to give them jobs and educate them. But it just seems as if we are still talking about another 20-year war.
I got to tell you, I think that this business of pretending that Jobs Corps is going to deal with people who are beheading folks in the name of their religion is insane and stupid, and it's unbefitting a serious statesmanship. The truth of the matter is that when you talk of education, you have to ask yourself, with what content? Okay, you think that teaching people how to use computers and other sort of thing is going to substitute for an understanding that allows them to give the facts of their lives meaning against the backdrop of eternity when they are confronting the fact that death will extinguish that life, and if their meaning is to extend beyond it, then there has to be a way of understanding how that's done. That's what religion does. And this is not being taken seriously, a shallow, stupid response to a very serious underlying challenge that has wreaked mayhem throughout the history of the world. And I think the way you have to answer that kind of an understanding is first make it clear that there is a serious objection based on timeless principles to the business of murdering people because they don't convert to your point of view. The United States was founded on a very serious articulation of that, which called on the name of the Creator God in the name of unalienable rights, including the right to life that could not be violated in the name of one's fanaticism.
Okay, I have about a minute left here.
The president never calls on this.
I have about
never
a minute
talks
left here,
about it.
Ambassador. I got to stop. I got about a minute left, and I'd like you both to give me a brief answer to this. When the president says that Muslim community leaders are in danger of losing the war because they're often too boring to prevent their young people from getting radicalized. Ambassador, 30 seconds, please.
Well, he doesn't take seriously the fact that they're up against the perception that if they go the wrong way against ISIS, they better be able to prove they're good Muslims. And it's a difficult task that the president obviously doesn't understand or take seriously. And I think that that's a sign of the shallow understanding that his whole factional administration is pursuing right now. They are caught up in a morass of contradictions precisely because the truly harmonious principles of the United States have no relevance to them. A serious case could be made that would inspire people based on the principles this country was founded on, starting with the source of justice in God.
Got to stop you there. First of all, let me go back now to Congressman Walker. Your response to that statement.
Well, I just think the statement doesn't nearly reflect the seriousness of the issue. Clearly, Muslim clerics have some responsibility here to try to take their people down a path of peace and cooperation. But the fact is that we need to do far more than that.
We do indeed, and hopefully we're going to here in the next couple of weeks, months, and years as we continue to follow this story, and hopefully we won't be talking about this in years to come as well. Ambassador Alan Keyes, Congressman Robert Walker, we thank you so much for your time.
Good to be with you.
Take care, gentlemen. The FDA is supposed to be looking out for the public good with regard to medications, but a new study seeks to show there is more protecting of drug companies than protecting of your health. It's all right here on Midpoint.